Okay, so we have screen recording for today. Yay! Okay, so there are several things. I know some people have not been able to install Access 2010 for one reason or another. Are there any particular questions or any particular issues other than the ones that I have heard already?
Well, I don't know what you've heard already.
Okay, we talked about some people could not mount it as an ISO. Some people could not burn it. So I can recommend a program to burn the image onto an actual CD first, and then from the CD you can install it. So that was the first issue. The second issue was whether it will mess up a trial version of Office 2010, and the answer is probably not if you choose only to install the other products from Office 2010 and then install Access as a full product from Access itself. So I think that will not mess up your trial version of Office 2010. Now remember, with Office 2010 you can also get a discount as a student, and I think the price is what, $70 or $79 for a full product. So that's still it's still considered a good deal, compared to what you have to pay. Yeah, I have that. I installed that one because it's also applicable to educators. So I have installed that, and it's good.
If I'd have known that the school was going to stop using 2007 as soon as I bought it, I would have bought 2010 anyways.
Well, remember it's 2011 already, so by the time you get used to it, it's probably already in time to get a new version.
I had to take a PowerPoint class, and so I got that, and then they said, "Oh, well, now that you got that, we're not going to use that anymore."
Yeah, nice. And then the next time you take a class in a project, they will find out that the current project is no longer the version that they want to use.
Can you just update Access, or will that mess up the rest of 2007?
What do you mean by update Access? If you have
Well,
2007?
Yeah.
If you have Office 2007, I would try to uninstall Access from 2007 and then install Access 2010, which is free from this class. So I would try that, because if it is not possible, the installer should complain, and say that these two products are not compatible. But I'm not 100% sure whether you can mix and match 2007 and 2010. So that's something that I can look up. I don't know for sure whether it will work or not. I have had 2003 and 2007 working together for some time, so I know those two can coexist. But I'm not sure about 2007 and 2010. So. How much do you want to hang on to your 2007, the Office 2007?
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking, if I don't have to, I don't want to have to mess with.
Okay.
If I don't have to, I don't want to have to not buy it.
Yeah, I understand. For $80, you can upgrade your 2010 using the student discount, and you can that's a full product. It's not just Access. It is open. It's Microsoft Office 2010. I don't want to have to make you guys pay extra for the software, so you kind of have to gauge and see whether you want to do it or not. I'm suspecting you can just go ahead and install Access 2010 without having to uninstall anything from 2007, and I think that should work. So I would try that first. Back up your system first, and then give that a try. And if it works, it's all good. If it doesn't work, at least you have a backup point. You can restore the system, just in case. In most cases, the installer would just complain and say, you already have a product. Do you want to upgrade it? And just have to say no, and then we have to look for another solution. Okay. So that's that. What I want to do next is to kind of show you guys, what I do when I teach classes like this, when I have to install a program just for a class. What I have here are several things. I have a portable hard drive, with me. That's down there. You guys cannot see it, and it is connected. It is mounted to. This will work in Windows as well. I have to do it in Linux, so I can do the screen recording. And in this case, I have to change to this particular drive here. And I use this script to start up the whole thing. Great, because I don't have that. Okay. I'm also using it to run TurboTax, for anything that I don't need to run all the time. Good. And this product is called a QEMU. It's kind of like VMware or VirtualBox. You can get any one of those emulation machines. It's essentially it's running Windows within Windows. Or within Linux, within another operating system. And what it does allow me to do is it allows me to run, a particular installation of Windows just for a particular purpose, like for teaching this class or, running TurboTax or something like that. Let me relocate the screen here. It does run a little bit slower than usual. In other words, if I were to install Windows XP on a real machine, it would be running a lot faster, or quite a bit faster. But these machines are fast enough that I can just run the virtual machine without, actually any major degradation of performance. So right here, I have, a particular account just for the VBA class. And it is running slower, on the school machine than my home machines. For some reason.
That'll probably be the case in my house too.
Well, it's just a little bit slower, but the nice part is, it does run. I don't know what's going on with these machines, because these are all new machines with the Core i3 processor, and they all run slower than, all my machines at home. So you can see now that I have Windows Windows running inside a window within Linux. Okay. In today's class, I'm recording everything, so I will upload everything to YouTube at the end of today's class. So that means everything that you see on that screen will also be recorded. Okay, it is it's quite a bit slower. Now this is just setting up the infrastructure of this class. You're definitely not required to run a virtual machine for this class. All right. And from here, I can run, Access. So I just go to All Programs. I have, all the software installed already. Just have to go to Microsoft Office, Access 2010. Go. So for those of you who want to kind of play with this kind of technology and have time to do it, this is something that's worth looking into, just because there are so many applications for virtual machines like this. Now let me just switch back to my host operating system, and let me go to Moodle first, so that we can talk about which part of the notes we are talking about today. We'll focus on variables today. Okay, the concept is called variables. Because I think most people, the majority of the class reported that they do not have any major programming background. So I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to start from the basic concepts of programming, and then just going to build from that slowly. So once we log into Moodle, we can go to this class site, and I just want to show you where we are at this point. We're pretty much done with introduction to VBA, and we are now beginning with the organization of VBA in Access, and also variables in assignment statements. So we'll start with this slide first, the organization of VBA in Access. This class, from 2009, has always been, centric to Access. I will also talk about some topics in Excel. If there are people interested in Excel, I can also touch on that one too. But the basic, the core of this class is basically using Access, because Access has the most use of VBA in, Access applications. Now this part here is kind of, but once we run the program, it will be clear, what this particular slide means. A VBA code is organized into one of three containers. There's a term called class module, which refers to a special container unit that is kind of like a factory. Okay, it's a template. You can stamp out additional things using a class construct or a class module. There's another thing called a regular module, and this is basically referring to just a general container that is not used, that is only used to organize objects and variables, so that you don't have everything kind of messed up into one big chunk. And then the last part is a form. Okay, it's not even shown here. The last thing is a form. You can use a form to also contain variables. So we'll get into those things today, and I can show you guys exactly where they are and how you can test the different behaviors of variables defined in all of these different items. And you can attach VBA when an application opens. This is just a example to show you what you can do. We have done this last week already. We have done it with Excel last week. This is just about the same thing, but it applies to Microsoft Access. We'll not follow this notes for today, because what I'll do is we can do this part here. What we want to do is to create forms, because in this class we'll be creating a lot of forms, a lot of stuff that we want to do. The outside or the graphical user interface will be in the form of a form in Access. Then we can attach text boxes, we can attach buttons and other things in order for your program, for your code to interact with. All right, so let me go switch to my virtual machine here and get started from this virtual machine. Everything is a little bit slow, so I just have to be a little bit more patient today. Now this is Microsoft Access. You can all start Microsoft Access from your workstations. And once you start Microsoft Access, it should give you a screen that is about the same as this one, if not exactly the same. Is that right or not? I mean, can everybody follow along? Exactly the same? Very good. Now for today's class and for a few more classes, we'll just start with a blank database. In other words, we are not starting with one of these templates that have been predefined already. At some point, we will use one of the predefined templates. And you can probably ignore this particular thing. Just say, and I cannot just say ignore. Okay. Well, in my case, I have to click OK because this is not a deep frozen machine, so it actually does matter. All right. And then the next thing you want to do is to look up this portion here. It shows you the file name and also the path where the file will be created. So you might want to double check and see where the file is going to be created if you want to save that file later on to your own thumb drive. You can also redirect this to your thumb drive. If you have a thumb drive with you, you can also just plug it in and then create the document on your thumb drive, so that way you can bring it home when you're all done with it. Are there any questions at this point about starting up Access 2010, which is really about the same as 2007? 2007 and 2010 are close enough. If you don't want to risk messing up your trial version, you can probably get by with 2007. 2003 is a little bit too old, so the difference between 2003 and 2010 is more significant. So I'll go ahead and create the database. I'm not going to give it a specific name because it's really just for illustration purposes in this class. So just go ahead and click Create. Is that showing well, or is it kind of too small? Do you guys want to zoom in? Okay, I can zoom that in a little bit. That's another thing about the virtual machine that is nice is I can rescale and zoom it in like this. Or I can zoom it out too if I wanted to. All right. Now this is not an Access class. If you want to learn Access, the product itself as a database management product, you want to take CISA. What is the name? Is it 320 and 321 with Dave Larrabee? So those two classes are good. If you want to learn the product Access itself. In this class, we're just borrowing Access as the environment in order to do VBA programming. So the first thing we want to do is to go to Create. If you look up the menu items here, or look up the ribbon, the third item is called Create. And once you click Create, it will give you a ribbon to show you, okay, what do you want to create? What we want to create today is just a blank form here. Okay, so it's about in the middle of the screen, would be the Forms section, and within the Forms section, the middle one is the blank form item. So you just click that once, and your screen should refresh a little bit faster than mine, and here we have a form. Now once you get into this screen, you have to pay attention to these three little icons at the bottom here, at the lower right-hand side. Right now we are in a layout view, and there's a form view, and there's also a design view. If you want to put anything into the form, you have to click design view. That's the only way to put it into the design view. Do we have any questions at this point? Nope. Okay. Let's put it all in. Let's put it into design view first, and just to take a look at what kind of view we are going to see when we put it into design view. After you put the form into design view, this is what you see. What you're seeing here is basically just a form that is completely blank. You can drag and drop items from the top, including the buttons, the folders, and other items, and you can create your form now. Let's not, even try to do too much, at this point. Let's go ahead and just, drag, try to draw a button. So in the tool, in the control panel here, you click the button icon, which is the fourth one from the left, and then your mouse pointer should change to this particular shape. It allows you to control how big of a button do you want to draw in the form. You can make it a big one, you can make it a small one. Okay, I'll just make it a somewhat medium-sized one.
Doesn't matter if it's lined up.
No, it doesn't matter whether it lines up or not. We just want one single button in the form. Now, as soon as you're done with dropping the button, you will see this dialog box. We don't want any of these predefined behavior because we want to have our own VBA code to correspond to that button. So what we want to do here is to press the cancel key. We don't want to select any one of these items. So we click cancel. And then this button doesn't do anything at this point, but we can still try it. We can still try to click the button, and just to see that the button itself can respond to clicks. To switch, now right now if you click it, it will get into edit mode. In other words, you can change the name of the button. Now, you can always change the name or the caption of the button to anything you want. In other words, the caption of a button has to be something that you can use as a variable name. It can contain punctuations, spaces, and whatnot. Okay. I just changed mine to test with an exclamation point to illustrate that you can use anything within the caption of a button. And now we can switch back into the form view, which is the first button, or the third button from the right-hand side over here. Can everybody see where I'm at here, where my mouse pointer is at? Okay, so you click that form view button once, and now the form is, quote unquote, running, which means you can actually interact with the form at this point. Yep.
Is it easier to just click the view button right there?
You mean on top?
Yeah. It's easier to see.
Where is it?
Under
Under,
files.
under where it says file, you can just click that button.
Oh, okay. Yep. I've always used the small buttons.
Okay. It's hard to see.
It's harder to see. Yep. Whichever one is easier for you to access, that's fine. And you can see that we can actually click the button. If I release the button, it is in this shade. When I press on it, it is in a different shade. In other words, the button is working, but there's nothing showing here because we have not programmed what the button is supposed to do. So now we can go back to design view. So click design view, or use the top here to change the view. I just use this one here. I'm more used to it.
That's what they tell you to use.
Hmm?
That's what they tell you to use in Mr. Larby's classes and Ms. Roca before she retired.
Is the bottom one or the top one?
The bottom one.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but I think they're all virtually that way.
Okay, now you can right click. Okay, let me do it again. Right click on the button itself. Do a right click, and you will see this is a pop-up menu. The pop-up menu typically will tell you what you can do with the button. And what we want to do is to build an event, for this button here. And it will give you 3 options. One is called a macro builder, which means you're going to use access macro to specify what to do when the button is pressed. The other one is expression builder, which is not the right thing to do anyway for a button. And the last one is what we want to do. It's called a code builder. And then we click OK. And it will switch into Visual Basic automatically. And this is what you should see at this point. So right now we're seeing quite a few things. And let me just kind of briefly explain what we are seeing here. This is the Visual Basic for Applications screen. And all it does is, it shows you the VBA code. You can continue to edit your code. Over here, we have the entire project view. Don't mind what is ACWZ main. It's basically Access Wizard main. If you click open that thing, it will show you tons and tons of items that we don't need to know in this class. So just leave that one alone. The second item you see is called Database 1, which is the database that we are dealing with in this particular project, in this particular file. And we don't directly deal with that, okay? So we will leave that one alone too. And over here we have form_form1, which basically means form 1, which is the temporary name for this form, is a form, okay? It's somewhat redundant. When you change the name of the form, the second part will change, but the first part will remain the same to indicate that it is a form. For this class, we can just use the default names for now because, that's not the main focus of this class. Over here, when you look into this main editor window, this is where you can type your code. And right now, we are specifying what we call an event handler for the click event of command 1. Command 1 is the name of the button that we just created. I changed the caption. I did not change the name of the button. Okay, so it is still called command 0, and that's the name of the button. _click means this is a subroutine to handle the event called click. Now this is different from most other types of programming. How many people have some sort of programming background other than VB or VBA type of programming? Okay, this is different because with all the other types of programming, your program is seeking out and try to ask the user to do something. Okay, it's asking the user, either through a prompt or it's actively trying to read a file or something like that. In VBA programming and mostly in VB programming as well, as long as it is a user interface kind of program, you are creating all these buttons and list boxes and combo boxes and whatnot. For the most part, the program isn't doing anything. It's waiting for you to do something first. So when you click on a button, then the application will try to look for the proper event handler to deal with that particular event. So when you click on a button, it's called an event. Okay, it is triggered by a user, and you're specifying in the program how to respond to the event in this case. And that's why this particular subroutine is called an event handler, and specifically it is handling the click event of command 0, which is a button. Do we have any questions about the concepts up to this point? Because I have introduced quite a few terms already that are kind of specific to graphical user interface programming. Are we doing okay so far? We don't want to do anything that's too complicated here. All we want to do is to use MSGbox, which is something that we introduced last time already. And we are not even going to specify any variables at this point. We just want to use double quote. Don't use single quote, because single quote means something else in Visual Basic Programming. Use double quote and just say hello, okay, or hello world if you're coming from a C background. Okay. So what we're doing here is very simple. When the button is clicked, it will show a message box. That's MSGBOX. That's message box. And the message box will just say hello. It's not going to do anything particularly useful or spectacular. But we just want to get some experience with how do we specify an event handler or what an event handler is in this case. There's no need to save anything. If you switch back to access through your taskbar and switch your window or switch your form into form view again, then you can run the program. Okay, there's no need to save anything before you can run your code. So now if you click the button in form view, it should pop up that box. Okay, just say whatever message you typed earlier, and that's exactly what it should display in the message box. Are we doing okay so far with first creating an empty form in Access, and 2, make a button inside the form, and 3, specify an event handler for the click event of the button?
Well, I'm going home and I'm gonna
Sorry?
So I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna use that against my grandma.
Sorry?
I'm gonna go home and use that against my grandma. I'm gonna make a button just to bother her.
Okay. Okay, but that's not the end of today's class. I mean, we just spent the last 30 minutes, to do this. The focus of today's class is to talk about what a variable is. In other words, what if I want to count something? What if I want to, count how many times someone has clicked a button? It sounds pretty easy, isn't it? Okay, it's just a counter. Okay, but there are several different types of different types of variables, and the different types of variables will behave differently. Okay, so let's go ahead and change the program a little bit here, and I will switch back to design view, or I can switch back to Microsoft Visual Basic using the taskbar. Okay, what I'm going to do here is I will click somewhere else on the screen here. Now you can see what is the current context, because I'm in the context of form_form1, which basically means if I try to define anything here, it will belong to the form itself. Okay, so form1 can have certain definitions associated with it. This event handler is a part of form1. If you have multiple forms, the different forms can have subroutines of exactly the same name. They can have variables of exactly the same name. Now, since we only have one form here, let's not worry about that. So the next thing we want to do is to define a variable. Okay? When you define or declare a variable in Visual Basic, unless you want to specify who can see the variable, in the most usual way, you just say dim, D-I-M, as the starting point to define a variable. And in this case, I will call this one a form counter. Now this time, you have to respect what you can use as a part of a variable name. You can only use alphanumeric characters plus the underscore character as a part of a name for variables. In other words, you cannot use comma, you cannot use space, you cannot use slash, plus, minus, all those punctuations. The only thing you can use are A to Z, lowercase, A to Z, uppercase, 0 to 9, and the underscore symbol as a part of a variable name. And it also has to start with non-numeric digits. Okay, you cannot start a variable name with 0 to 9. Okay, so but this is perfectly fine. The form counter is perfectly fine. Visual Basic. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I start with the underscore?
You can start with an underscore if I am correct. I think you can. Although it would be kind of unusual to start, a variable name with an underscore. Now, in this case, form counter starts with a lowercase f. VBA is case insensitive. In other words, if you try to refer to this variable name using uppercase F for form, counter, it will still work. Okay? But as a general rule, when you're defining variables, you always start with a lowercase as the name of the variable. The convention that we use in this class is really loose by comparison or comparing to cisp372, which is the Visual Basic class. In that class, Professor Irvine will tell you exactly what he expects from the name of a variable and subroutines. In this case, in this class, I'm really, flexible in terms of that. And the next thing we want to do is to say what kind of a variable this is. As a counter, well, let's see. These are all the different types that it can be, but of all these types, we just want it to be an integer. That's fine. In other words, what we have done so far is to declare form counter as an integer variable. What exactly is a variable? What do you think? Does anyone want to give it a shot?
Something that can hold more than one value?
Most variables can only store one single value, but that value can change. Go ahead.
It's it's pretty much a label that contains a type of data, usually defined.
Okay. It's an entity, that has two things. It has a name, so that you can refer to it, and it has a value. The value can change over time. That's basically what what a variable is in general. So in this case, we have a variable with a name of form counter, and the kind of stuff that you can store with form counter are integers. At any particular time, form counter can only store a single integer value. But you can change that, okay? You can change that over time.
An
Yep.
integer has two parts of what?
An integer, okay, a variable has two main parts. One is the name, so that you can refer to the variable, and then the second part is the value. Okay, and the value can change, as the program executes. So you can update the value of a variable over time. But at any particular time, it can only have one single value. So in this case, form counter will start with a value of 0, but you can change it to 1, you can change it to 2, but at any time, it can only store a single value, which is an integer, in this case. So are we doing okay so far with the concept of an integer? So far it's okay? Okay. And what we'll do is we'll just kind of add confusion to the mix here. Inside the subroutine called command0_click, or if you have renamed it to something else, that would be the other one. I'll define click counter here. That's a different name, click counter, and also as integer. So now we have two integer variables. One is the form counter, and one is a click counter. What is the main difference between these two variables, or the declarations? Yep.
Click counter is local, and form counter is a form variable.
Exactly. They exist in different contexts. Okay. When you look at click counter, it is inside the definition of the subroutine called command0_click. If you look at form counter, it is inside the general context of form 1. So that means they exist under different conditions. Now this is going to be very interesting, because what we'll do is we'll run this program, and we'll change the program just a little bit. What we'll do is we'll change the program so that it will show me the values of both counters when we click it, and in addition, it will also increment the values of both counters every time we click it. So the first thing we want to do is to change the message box. Okay, so we change the message box so that it say form counter equals to. Now this part has to be double quoted so that it will display the same way it is shown here. Because if you don't put the double quotes here, then form counter will be considered as a variable name, and then the equal symbol will have different meanings. That's not what we want to do here. We just want it to display form counter equals to. And then we use the ampersand here. The ampersand symbol represents concatenation. It allows you to put different pieces together as one single thing to display on the screen. So right here we are saying, oh, this is not what we want to display. This is not the entire thing that we want to display. We want to display something else after form counter equals to. So what we want to do is to say form counter after the ampersand symbol. In other words, the actual value of the variable form counter will be printed after form counter equals 2. Let's just do this part here and call it the first version of this program. Okay? This is all that we want to do at this point. We're not even doing anything with click counter because we don't want to write programs and write too much code at the same time and then only realize that the program does not work. So now when we go back to Access and switch to Form View, when you click the button, it doesn't show you the old message anymore. It shows you form counter equals 0, which is what we expect because all variables, when they start to exist, they all have a value of 0. All integer variables in VBA start with a value of 0. If you click it again, same thing, no change in behavior because we haven't written any code to change the value of form counter. So let's go back to Visual Basic again. And this time we'll add some more code here. So on the line following the MSG box, we'll say form counter equals form counter plus 1. This is your very first assignment statement. Okay? This is an assignment statement. Basically what it means is, it's an operation. It is not a statement. In other words, it's not saying that the value of counter equals to the value of counter plus 1 because that can never be true. What this is saying is we evaluate the right-hand side first. The right-hand side is form counter plus 1. We evaluate the right-hand side as an expression. It will evaluate to a particular value. The question is, what are we doing with that value? We'll use that value to update the left-hand side. It just so happens that in this case, both the right-hand side and the left-hand side refer to the same variable form counter. But don't let that bother you. Okay? It should not bother you because what the program is going to do is it will first evaluate this part here. It will evaluate to a single value. If this is the first time you run this statement, form counter would initially have a value of 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. So in other words, the entire right-hand side evaluates to a single value of 1. What we'll do is we use that 1 to update the left-hand side, which turns out to be form counter again. And that's it. Okay? We don't go back and re-update itself because otherwise there's no end to it. Are there any questions about this particular line of code? Its only effect is to increase the value of form counter by 1. Are we doing okay so far with the concept? Okay, let's go ahead and test the program again. So we switch back to Access, turn our form back into Form View. I don't think we actually have to switch to Design View to make changes in VB. And now we click Test the first time. It has a value of 0. Is it complaining?
Oh, I know what I did.
Okay. Now the fun begins when we click it a second time. When we click it a second time, form counter has a value of 1. If you click it another time, form counter would have a value of 2, and so on. Yep.
I bet I did what I had.
It's complaining because you.
I had an equal sign and then I tried to
Put the equal sign. Oh, okay. Just retype the whole thing. So that illustrates the basic use of a variable. A variable in this case can store an integer value that can change over time by using the assignment statement. Are we doing okay so far? Okay. But we haven't made use of the other variable that we have defined, the click counter thing. So let's go ahead and add something to the program so that we can do something with click counter. So what we'll do is we'll extend the message box thing to include another ampersand, and this time we'll start with a comma, and then we'll say click counter equals 2, and then another double quote, and then another ampersand, and this time click counter here. In other words, what we want to do is not only to show the value of form counter, but we also want to show the value of click counter. Yep.
Can you make that bigger?
You mean the text?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can zoom it. Properties window, Explorer window, toolbars. No, let's see. View code. Oh, I'm already viewing code. We want to change the property to make it bigger.
My whole button page disappeared. My whole button page disappeared.
Your whole.
The button that we made just disappeared.
Okay. Well, I cannot stop right now, so. But the whole thing is going to be recorded, so you can still, if you cannot follow, you can still kind of do it afterwards. But right now I'm trying to change the size of this editor here. Does anyone know whether there's a way to resize the font, change the font size?
It's very, very well hidden.
You may have to change the system font size.
I don't think I want to spend too much time on that. Well, this is all going to be recorded, so you can watch it again in YouTube, and in YouTube you can probably just kind of maximize the screen and see all the details. Okay. And we want to add another statement here and say click counter equals click counter plus 1. In other words, we are doing exactly the same thing to both counters. One is the form counter, and the other one is the click counter. And we want to see whether the program shows any difference when we press the button in the form. What do you guys think? What do you think we'll do? What do you think will be the behavior of this program when we click the button? What do you think it will show? Well, it kind of depends on how click counter comes into existence. Okay, we'll see. The behavior of this program is going to be a little bit curious. Okay, so I click it. It shows form counter equals 3, click counter equals 0, and that's because the form counter is keeping its own count, and as long as I don't close the form, the counter keeps counting. Okay, so a form counter, which is a property of the form itself, continues to exist and maintains its value as long as the form is in access. If I close the form and open it again, then it will reset. I can demonstrate that as well. But now the question is, what if I click the button again? Okay, when I click the button again, as expected, form counter equals 4 because it keeps counting up, counting up. But click counter is still a 0. Why is that? In fact, yep, go ahead.
It's within a function.
It's within a function, yeah, but that's but that should only limit who can see it, but not whether it should still keep incrementing even though the rest of the program cannot see it. Well, as it turns out, yes, go ahead. Either one.
I would say it's because you redefine it every time you click, so it resets
That's
it every time.
exactly right. Okay, that's exactly right. Click counter, being a variable defined or declared inside a subroutine, does not even exist until the subroutine is active. And as soon as the subroutine is done, guess what happens to it? It evaporates into thin air. Okay? So that means every time we click, this subroutine, this chunk of code becomes active. As it becomes active in response to a click, a new instance of click counter starts to exist, starting with a value of 0. Then we proceed to the message box line, and that's why this portion of the program shows that click counter has a value of 1. Then we proceed to the last line of this subroutine here, and we add one to click counter before the end of the subroutine. So click counter actually got to a value of 1. And then what happens to it? This chunk of code has come to an end. When this chunk of code comes to an end, so will the variables defined inside the subroutine. So click counter stops existing. It just evaporates into thin air. And then the next time you click, we get into this chunk of code, a new instance of click counter comes into existence, initialized to a value of 0, gets displayed, increment to 1, and then die again. Okay? And that's why the code did not work when we have click counter as a variable defined inside a subroutine. So why do we want to define variables inside the subroutine this way? I mean, it seems like it's useless. Well, it allows you to have multiple subroutines, and they can all have the same variable name. Okay? Because they are not shared. Every single subroutine can have its own variable I, okay, just for instance. And none of those variable i's have anything to do with each other, because they all belong to just that instance of the subroutine that is in execution. In this class, I'm not going to go into the theory of how the variables starts to exist and how they die. I'm just going to say that they are associated with the subroutine itself. When the subroutine is active, they come into existence. When the subroutine is done, they all die. They all evaporate into thin air. Okay, well that's kind of cool so far. We have illustrated 2 kinds of variables at this point. But let's go ahead and go here and close this form. I'm just right-clicking on the Form tab and select Close. It will ask you, do you want to save it first? And the answer is yes, we want to save it first. And we'll just save it as Form 1, because this is nothing more than just a test form, so there's no particular name associated with it. And now the form does not exist anymore. Well, the form is still there. It is still defined in the access document. It is just not active anymore, because you can see form on the left-hand side. You can see form over here. Because the form is still defined, it is just not active at this point. If you want Form 1 back, what do? Just double-click it. Okay, just double-click it, and you should automatically get into Form View, which means the button is ready to go again. I guess double-click doesn't do it. Okay, right-click and open. That will do it. There we go. We have our form back. Now this time, click the button again. Oh! Form counter is starting from 0 again. Well, that's because form counter is a property of the form itself. As long as the form is still up, it maintains its value. Okay, form counter will continue to maintain its value. But when I close the form and reopen the form, then the variable inside the form is recreated just like the form itself. And when the variable is recreated, it starts with a value of 0 for integer variables. And that's why the value is reset into 0. Well, that's good in some cases, but what if my objective is to count how many times people have clicked the test button, not within the lifespan of this form, but for the entire lifespan of the application itself? Since the document is open, since the access the database is open, I don't care whether people open and close Form 1 many times. I want to keep counting how many times they have clicked the test button. Well, seems like I don't have any current mechanism to do it, because anything that belongs to a form gets destroyed when the form is closed. Okay?
You can add it to the table.
Hmm?
You can add it to the table.
You can store in the table, but I can do a shortcut and we don't actually have to store in the table. So what we can do is switch back into Access again. And this time we look at this part here, Database 1. And we'll right-click on Database 1 inside the project view. And we'll say Insert Module. Okay? What this will do is it will insert an organizational unit. Okay, for the lack of a better word, a module is nothing more than a container to help you organize related stuff together. But a module will start to exist as soon as the document is open. As soon as you open this access file, the module that I defined will also start to exist. And the modules do not die until I close the entire document. In other words, what I define inside a module is no longer tied to a subroutine. It is no longer tied to a form. It will start to exist as soon as the document, the access database is open, and it will only cease to exist when the document itself is closed. Is that doing okay so far in terms of concepts? Okay, so we'll go ahead and define a module in this case. And the default name is module 1. We'll just let it be, we don't want to mess with that name. And we'll do about the same thing, except this time it's a little bit different. This time we'll say public. Okay. We'll say public, and then we'll say this is a document counter. If you prefer to type, a shorter name like DocumentCounter or something like that, be my guest. As long as you use it consistently, we'll be fine. And we'll also say as integer, because this is just another integer variable. So now we have 3 integer variables, but they're all defined in different contexts. Let's go ahead and revisit all 3 integer variables that we have at this point. The first one is called click counter. Click counter is defined inside a subroutine, which means it only comes into existence when the subroutine is active, and it will die immediately after the subroutine is done. So its visibility is also limited to only this subroutine itself. No other subroutine from anywhere can actually see the variable name click counter. The second one is our form counter, which, as the name implies, belongs to the form itself. It will start to exist as soon as the form itself is created and displayed. And as long as the form is up and displayed, that counter will keep its value. It will maintain its value. However, if you close the form in access, then the value of this variable will disappear just like the form itself. When you reopen the form, it will recreate this variable, and it will start with a value of 0 again. The third variable that we have defined so far is the module variable, which is called a document counter in this case. It belongs to module 1. Module 1, or just like any other modules, will start to exist as soon as you open and access the database, the document itself, and it will only cease to exist when you close the document. Okay, so this one has the longest lifespan because it starts to exist as soon as you open the document, and it does not cease to exist until you close the document. So what we'll do now is we'll change our program just one more time to reflect that. Well, if I want to extend this line to also indicate the value of document counter, it's going to be kind of long. Now you can actually type it. Visual Basic does not have a limitation. Well, it does, but it's I think it's pretty long of how many characters you can type on a single line. It's just that for us, it's harder to see when we have the whole line wrapping around. So what we'll do is we'll use the, let's see, this is Visual Basic. I think it is the / symbol as a continuation symbol. Is that true, or is it the ampersand?
The ampersand.
It's ampersand.
With or without underscore, I don't know.
Oh, it's the underscore actually in that case. Yeah, the underscore symbol as the very end, a punctuation of a line means continuation. Now let me just show you what. Okay, you guys don't have to type anything at this point. I'll just keep typing here. So don't type anything until I'm done here, because I want you to focus on what you see on the screen here, and I'll explain what you're seeing just a little bit. Okay. So right now you're seeing 2 lines. Message box is on one line, and then we have the ampersand, double quote, comma, document counter equals to ampersand document counter as quote unquote a second line. The underscore symbol on the first line is what we call a continuation symbol. What it is doing is it's telling Visual Basic and say, oh, hold on, this line actually has not ended yet. Consider whatever is on the next line as a part of this line. Does everybody understand what I said? Okay. So basically this is saying that everything in the second line, everything that I have highlighted here, is actually a part of the first line. And this symbol, all that it is doing is to say this line has not ended yet. Okay? The following line is a continuation of this line. Okay? Are there any questions at this point? No? Okay. If you type the program the way it is, it should not give you any syntax error. On the other hand, if you miss that, underbar at the very end of the first line, then the second line will trigger, Visual Basic to complain because it is not valid syntax to begin with the ampersand symbol all by itself.
I have the underscore there. It tells me it's going to reset my project.
Sorry?
I'm going to underscore them and tell me how to reset my project.
This actually will reset your project because you don't have a choice. Well, you have to type something to the second line.
Well, as soon as I hit that bar is when that came up. That's why I haven't done anything yet.
You have to switch to the edit mode in order to continue to change the program.
I haven't changed anything because I lost all the button and everything, so I've been kind of like,
Okay. But if you watch the video again, that actually is a better way to to kind of replicate the action. Okay. So this is all done, and we only need one more thing to do, is to add one to the document counter itself. So we say document counter equals document counter plus 1, but it is not, let's see, it takes it, the way it is. This is not the best way to do it because I did not say, document counter from which module, but since I made it public, it is now visible to the entire program. Because technically speaking, it is better to say module 1 dot document counter so that you can say document counter from which module. I switch back to my VBA, to my access screen. I click it, and it shows that form counter equals 1 because I clicked it once already. Click counter equals 0. We know this one will stay at 0 all the time. And document counter equals 0. Okay, we'll click OK. Click test again, and you can see click counter is the only one that is not counting up. Both of the other two counters are counting up just fine. And we'll click it a few times. All right, I think that's enough. So what I'll do now is to close Form 1 again. Right-click on the tab, and then just click Close. And it will ask you, do you want to save everything? And the answer is yes, and keep the same name. Okay. So we have now defined a form in the module and a subroutine inside the form. Let's go ahead and open the form again. So we right-click on Form 1 and then click Open. And now we have Form 1 open again. And we'll go ahead and click the button. And this time is somewhat curious. We already know the behavior of form counter because form counter belongs to the form. When we close the form, it goes away. When we recreate the form, it is reinitialized to 0 because it's a brand new variable. So we already know, what it is supposed to do. Click counter, we also know what it is supposed to do because it belongs only to the subroutine. It does not exist until the subroutine itself is active, but it also goes away whenever the subroutine has ended, which basically means every single time it's going to display 0. What is most curious is document counter keeps going. Okay, it was 3 last time, and now it is 4, even though we closed Form 1. And that's because Module 1 has absolutely nothing to do with Form 1. You can destroy Form 1, reopen it as many times as you want. It does not change anything that belongs to Module 1. Okay? So if you want anything that has persistence over the entire period when the document is open, you want those to be module-based variables. Are there any questions at this point? Yep.
So what do we have to do if we want it to persist across document openings?
If you want to persist across document, opening, then you have to make it, a part of the table. Well, since this is a database program, it is very easy to do. You might be able to associate something with the document itself, but I don't know exactly how to do that yet. But the easiest way to do it is to associate it with a table because it's a database program. But that's a very good question, okay? The question is, what if I close the document and reopen the document? The document counter will also be reset because every single variable will basically die at some point. It is not persistent, okay? The term is it is not persistent. When you close the file and reopen it, the variable, even a module-based counter will reset to 0. Well, we can test that pretty quickly. We can go to File or just click the floppy disk symbol to close the file, save, and then we go ahead and close it. Yeah, where's close? Well, let's exit.
Close database.
Close database. Thank you. Okay, now the database is closed, the document is closed, and then we go ahead and open the same thing again. And I think it keeps track of the most recently accessed database. It shows up here. I open the database again. And once again, because I did not save it or I did not set up a trusted location. Do you guys remember what we talked about last time? The trusted location. If you do not set up a trusted location and your document, be it Access, Microsoft Word, or any type of document, if it contains macros, you will see this warning and say, hey, something, it could be malicious. Okay, we don't know for sure. It could be malicious. It gives you a chance to say, okay, let's not enable the content. But since in this case we know this is something that I just created a little bit earlier, we can just click Enable Content. And now we have the entire document open. Right-click on Form 1, and then just select Open. And click Test. And this time you can see all 3 counters starts from 0. In other words, even a module level variable does not persist over the closing of the document itself. Are there any questions at this point about the 3 different types of variables? The first type is defined inside the subroutine, which is a chunk of code that has a name. The second one is defined inside the form, and the third one is defined inside a module. Any questions at this point? No questions? Are you doing okay?
No.
Okay, excellent. Okay. All right. The next thing we want to do is to say, but I don't want to have to keep adding to the MSG box. I want these things to display as their own text. Okay, is there a way to do this? Well, of course there's a way to do it. So what we need to do, I'm just moving my button somewhere else, and we need to take a look at all the different things that you can add to your form. There are all kinds of fancy stuff that you can add to a form, but we're not going to do anything too fancy. What we'll do is just to use a label. Okay? What is the main difference between this guy and this guy here? This is a text box, and this is a label. What is a text box? What does it let you do? You can type something, right? It's an input field, okay? It's a field where you can type something as the input. What do you think a label let you do? A label is only for display purposes, exactly. Now, can I click on the label and have the label to respond to the click and do something?
Sure.
The answer is yes. Okay, it's very tricky. As it turns out, everything that you can put into a form can respond to a click, even if it is just a label. Okay, now that's not normally done. Okay, it is not normally done. Okay, but it can be done. So a button is nothing more than a visual thing that shows that it can be clicked. But you can actually do the same thing with a label. You can click on a label and have the label to respond to a click event. Okay, it's just traditionally speaking, it is not done. Okay, so we won't do that, because it's usually not done. But instead, what we'll do is we'll define two labels. Okay. Well, let's define three labels. Well, define one first. One thing at a time. So here I'm defining a label. And when you define a label using the drag, method, you have to give the caption, the initial caption something, because if you don't type anything, it won't, even start to exist. So we'll just, say that this is, we'll just put a 0 here, okay? And it shows you a little symbol here, and it is not associated with a control. That's fine. Don't worry about it, because this is not an access class. We're not going to associate a label with a particular control in this case. Okay. We do want to know the name of this label. Now, how do we know the name of this label here? If you do a right click and go to properties, it will open up the property sheet of whatever is selected on the screen. In other words, at this point, because the label itself is selected, I display the property of this particular label. It will show you everything. It shows you the name of the label. In this case, it's label 1. It shows you the caption, which is 0. It shows you whether it's visible or not. It shows you the width, the height, the top, and so on and so forth. That's all fine, because all I wanted to do is to know the name of the label. It is label 1. Okay, that's good enough for me. So what I will do this time is I will change the code for test. I switch back into Visual Basic, and this time I'm not going to use a message box. Well, let me keep the message box for the time being, but I will also add one more line here. This time it's going to be also something. This is also something new that we haven't seen before. On an empty line, I type label 1 and then a period. As soon as you type period, it shows you a list box. This list box shows you everything that belongs to a label. In this case, label 1. So it shows you that label 1 has a back color, has back shape, back style, back theme, color index, blah, 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 blah. Now, obviously, with a one-unit class, we're not going to talk about every single thing that a label has. What we want to do is to change one thing. I want the label to show the value of a particular counter. Let's take form counter here. So what we want to do is to say continue the typing, but with caption. So you say label 1 dot caption, and you can see that once you type in CAP, it automatically finds that you must mean caption. But that's fine. You can just click on caption or press enter. I think not enter, tab will auto-complete and select caption. So we want to say that the caption of label 1, I want it to be something. In this case, I want it to be form counter. Now this is also bad programming practice. Can someone kind of guess why I said this is bad programming practice? Well, what is form counter? It's an integer. Very good. It's a number. And what do you think is a label or a caption of a label? Text. It's text, okay? Well, text and numbers are not necessarily the same thing. A Visual Basic, or VBA in this case, will let me go because I did not say crank up, all the checking and everything to the strictest level. So it will just try its best to guess what I really want to do. And in this case, it gets right. Because what I want to do is I want to use form counter, but I want to use the text representation of the integer and put it inside the caption property of label 1. Okay? This is object-oriented programming. This is the first time we see something like this, and it is called object-oriented programming. What is the object?
Label 1.
Label 1 is the object. Okay, label 1 is the object, which is kind of like a variable. Okay, it's just like our counters. It's a variable, but unlike our counter, it does not have a single value. It's an object. It has many attributes. One of its attributes is the caption. Okay, you can also control its visibility. In other words, is this caption or is this label even shown in the form? You can control that using its visible property. So it has many properties, and in this case, we're only selecting the caption property to be the left-hand side of the assignment. In other words, we want to update the caption property of label 1. The period symbol, this one here, is basically the same thing as apostrophe S in English. In other words, we are basically saying label 1's caption should become form counter. That's what we are saying in this program. Are we doing okay so far with the concept of this particular line? Okay, let's go ahead and run the program again and see what this line is going to do. So we are slowly improving the program so that we don't need to rely on message box to do everything. So we click test. It shows the same message box as last time because I did not remove that line. I did not make any changes to that line. We click OK. We click the button again, and you can see the label is now changing. Every time I click, the label keeps changing. In other words, we have just associated the value of an integer variable with a label. The association is not automatic. It relies on an assignment statement so that the right-hand side of the assignment statement is used to update the left-hand side. But nonetheless, we are now able to respond to a control, which in this case is the button. We can also interact with elements that we use inside the form. In this case, it's just a plain label. Do we have any questions at this point? Let me show you the code again, in case anyone wants to ask questions about this particular code. Have we used anything about Access at this point as a database program? Absolutely nothing. Do you think we can do something about specific things inside the database in Access?
Sure.
Absolutely. Just not today, nor next time. It's going to be a little bit down the line. Any questions about the concepts? About the syntax? Oh, what is the syntax of VBA? What is the syntax in programming? What happens when I make mistakes in terms of syntax? Can someone mess up this program? Just tell me how to mess up this program to show a syntax error. Okay? Go ahead.
Line continuation.
Take out the line continuation symbol. Very good. Okay? So to the human eye, it's not going to make any difference. In fact, I will mess it up even more obscurely. Let me just add a space after the line continuation symbol. That's just a space there. And, oh, I think it automatically took out that space. That didn't work. That did not work. Okay, let me see this. Okay, we'll take this, ampersand here and put it to the line before. Like that. Okay? So it seems like they should mean exactly the same thing because, we're just, changing the ampersand from the second line, the beginning of the second line, to the last symbol of the previous line. And then as soon as I click somewhere else, Visual Basic complains with an error message that is kind of cryptic. All it says is compile error, invalid character. Okay, but that's a syntax error. It's a syntax error because Visual Basic does not expect to see an ampersand there. Because an ampersand can only be the very last character of a line to mean continuation. If it finds, underline or underscore somewhere inside the line all on its own by itself, it's a syntax error because Visual Basic does not know what to do with it. It's like, oh, I don't know. I do not expect to see you here. Okay? And that's what a syntax error is. Do you guys think that you will encounter syntax errors as you write programs in any programming language? No, not really. Now let me teach you one trick to learn how to deal with syntax errors. Okay? Now this is an introduced error, so it's easy to fix because I just put it there to show you what happens when I introduce an error in the program. So it makes it very easy to me. It's easy for me to fix this particular error. So one trick that I can teach you guys to learn how to recognize the error messages and learn how to fix the errors is get the program working the first time. Don't write any long programs. Write something that's fairly simple. And then mess it up. Okay? But you mess it up systematically. Okay? You try out different things to mess it up, and then you look at the error message that is reported. So this is one way to learn about the syntax error messages from any type of programming language. Because a lot of times the error message does not tell you exactly what the problem is. It just tells you there's a problem. So it is your job to learn how to interpret those messages and find out, oh, so when it says blah, 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 it actually means blah, 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 blah. So let me just introduce another syntax error here. Yeah, let's just say that I forgot to type as, and just say dim click counter integer, and I put my cursor somewhere else, and this time it complains and say expected end of statement. Does that have anything to do with the missing as? No, absolutely nothing, right? So this is what I was just saying, is you want to make the program compile and work, and everything is good. Then you go back in and you mess up the program systematically. Because when you introduce a syntax error and it complains, do you know how to fix it? You do, because you introduced that error intentionally. So in this case, I know exactly what to do to fix it because I just put it here. I introduced this error by removing the word as, and all I have to do is to put it back there, and now there's no syntax error. So this is not just a trick for this class, for VBA or VB. You can take a class in C, you can take a class in Java, you can take a class in Perl, PHP, Python, and so on and so forth. The same trick works. Okay? Make it work first, then you mess it up, then you can see exactly what kind of message you should see when you accidentally introduce the same error next time. Yeah. Okay. So this is all that we have time for today. I will give you a homework assignment later tonight. I will send you a message, to tell you there's a homework assignment. I don't want to give you the same homework assignment as last year because, the same homework assignment I used last year and 2 years ago. As it turned out, about 1/3 of the class could finish it. That kind of defeats the whole point of the homework assignment because 2/3 of the class could not approach the problem. Okay, so I'm going to change that a little bit, make it a little bit more simple, as the first stage, and then when we are done with the first stage, then we'll work with the second stage. Okay, so I will have to go back home and actually spend some time to rework the homework assignment. When it's all done, I will send you guys an email message through Moodle to tell you that the homework assignment is up. And when the homework assignment is up, I want to teach you, or at least let you know, how to check your homework assignment. Some of you have used Moodle already, and you already know how to find your homework assignment. Let me just turn on editing and show you where you can find your homework assignment, just so that we know how to deal with this. Okay. I'm just going to add a bogus homework assignment. So this is not your homework. Don't worry about it. In fact, I'll say bogus homework. Okay. Just to show you how to do I'll keep everything the same here because I will remove the homework assignment very soon. Okay. And I will switch my role to a student role so that this will be the same view that you will see when you log into Moodle. Do you see the homework assignment anywhere on the screen right now?
Assignments.
Upcoming events. Okay? Now, upcoming events is a very useful feature. I think D2L has a similar feature. It shows you, what is going to happen in the next 2 weeks or so, what is due within the next 2 weeks. So in this case, Monday, on the 4th of April, on Monday, at 8:50, this homework assignment is due. So this is one way to find a homework assignment. The second way to find a homework assignment is to go to the topic where I added the homework assignment. In this case, it is in topic 2. The third way to find a homework assignment is to go to the assignment activity, click that one, and you will see the bogus homework assignment. So there are quite a few ways to find your homework assignment. If I have a calendar up, it will also show here if I switch to April. Because as soon as I switch to April, you can see April 4th is highlighted. If you put your mouse pointer and hover over that, it will also show you that the homework assignment called bogus homework is due on that day. So there are all these tools to help you locate what we have to do within the next 1 or 2 weeks. I think the range is up to 2 weeks or so. Okay? So don't do the bogus homework assignment. There's nothing to do with that one. I will give you specific instructions for your actual homework assignment, and it will be done sometime tonight. If you check your email tomorrow in the morning, you should see that message. And I want to make sure that everybody can at least get 2007 Access installed. You got that?
I
Okay.
have that.
Because I think 2010 can open 2007 documents.
I can.
And you are actually at a slightly, you're at a slight advantage here because all my notes have screenshots from 2007, not 2010. They're close enough, okay? I think 2010 is very, very close to 2007, so it should not be a problem.
Difference is office button.
Okay? And also tonight, I will post my notes online. And the first time I will show you how to find the recorded session of today's class on YouTube. You basically just enter today's date, which is 2011-2011. Today is still in March, so it's 03. And then today's date is 28. So it's 2011-03-28. And then put a space, and then the class code, which is cisp372. If you put in those 2 terms in YouTube, you should be able to find today's lecture once I upload it. Not right now, you have to do it like later. Okay. I'll send you guys a note too, regarding how to find a YouTube clip, just for the first time. But after this, you should know the pattern to look for, for all future classes. All right, that's it for today. And next time, we'll be talking about dialog box construction. We have already started that a little bit, and we'll also specify, event handlers and stuff like that.